You show respect to the ones that came before you. You just do it. You just say nothing and just keep walking. When you're with them, just listen. Don't speak. Don't say anything. Let them do the talking when they want to do it.
We are speaking today with Kurt Morrow, who had the wonderful opportunity to work with Milt Hinton, the great Milt the Judge Hinton, born in 1910, left this world in 2000. So great to chat with Kurt about this jazz legend who Kurt had a lot of opportunity to spend time with. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations. We do this kind of thing here every week, but this one's a little bit different. And I have thought for a while about what a tragedy it is that I didn't start this podcast sooner. I started this podcast in 2007. Milt the Judge Hinton died in 2000. So obviously I couldn't interview Milt for the podcast, but I can talk to Kurt about Milt. This was Kurt's idea. It was inspired by a quote I put online. These are wheels within wheels, I realize, from Adam Booker. Adam Booker, the great jazz bass player down at Appalachian State University. He got the chance to work with Milt also. So I put a quote out online. Kurt saw it and said, Jason, we should talk. If you ever want to talk, I've got some great Milt Hinton stories. And Kurt has some great Milt Hinton stories. We talk about meeting Milt at the Jazz Institute in Skidmore Jazz Institute. Kurt stayed with Milt in the faculty housing there, drove him around to Boston Market for lunch, to go buy groceries, and to meet players like Elvin Jones and a host of other players. We dig into that and much more. You're totally going to love this conversation. And we have some great sponsors for this episode. We have the A440 Violin Shop, Bass Violin Shop, and Upton Bass. So let's dive into our conversation with Kurt, and we just have to drop in a little bit of Milt Hinton playing and singing Old Man Time.
Old man time, he's so mean. He's the meanest man you've ever seen. He gave me.
I was teaching in a music store back then, and I was reading, I think I was just looking through Jazz Times magazine, and I saw the little advertisement with Milton's picture on it, and I started playing jazz about 89. I've been a bass player since 1977. I've been a barber since 1989, and just in case I didn't have a gig. And it was in 89 that I got bit by the jazz bug. And so I just found that little ad, and I saw Milton's name, and by then I had begun, the academia side of it. So I began studying, so I knew who Milton was. And I thought, man, I would really want to study with him. That's what I'd really like to do. So I made arrangements that summer of 94 to go to Skidmore Jazz Institute in Saratoga Springs, New York, so upstate. The first year, I was just like every student that goes to the jazz camps. And what I want to say here, I've been thinking about this, and part of the purpose of you and I doing a podcast on Milt Hinton and my experience with him is to let young aspiring jazz musicians or musicians in any genre, they have to go to these people. They have to go find them. Living in Topeka, Kansas, there's some great players in Kansas City, but to get to that level of player, you have to, these jazz camps are amazing. Or jazz institutes. I went to Skidmore and then got this amazing Milt Hinton experience. I went to University of North Texas. They have a great jazz camp, and I've studied with Lynn Seaton. This was later on. I was there in 2010 to 2012 in their graduate program, and all the players that school brings in. And then I also went to the Stanford Jazz Workshop and studied with Ray Brown in 97. But my point in telling you that is just to let people know that those are the places where you will find these folks, because they want to give the information. That's what they're there for. They're there to teach you. And But if you don't go there and make the effort, and now what we're getting ready to talk about, that was 23 years ago for me. I'm 53 now. I was turning 30 when I met Milton. It's just important for people to, with technology and being able to FaceTime and YouTube, all that's really good, the YouTube experience and finding, that kind of stuff. But to just go learn from them face to face and sit in their presence of the masters, I just knew that I had to do that if I wanted to gain any kind of, for me, I knew I had to take myself to the East Coast and all these other places, West Coast and so forth, to find him. Okay, so Milt Hinton, 1994, I flew there. And that was a challenge. I'd never flown with a double bass. And Gerald Zaffitz was the director back then. Don McCormick was like the guy above him, but Gerald was the guy that arranged all the students coming in and made sure all the wheels were turning and all that kind of thing, and organized the whole thing. And then another gal named Maria McCall, she was instrumental in, hey, what time do I need to be there? What do I, that kind of thing. So I get there, and that first year was just like anybody's. I just met Milton. If you know anything about what jazz camps are about, you get assigned a combo. And then there are various lessons or classes throughout the day that you go to, and then you do your combo at the end of the week. That first year, by the way, and Skidmore is a 2-week program. And in the middle of that 2 weeks that you're there in June into the first week of July is the Saratoga Jazz Festival. So you go to that. All the students go to that, and then they see all the heavyweights that are playing. Just like today, all of them would play there. But anyway, that's what that particular place is about. And it's 2 weeks. Okay, so my first 2 weeks were, Gerald picked me up at the airport. We got my bass there, and I met all new kinds of people. And then I met Milton. And, he was like needless to say, he was the jazz historian. He was the historical figure that was there and lived to tell about it. And a lot of what Milton was about a lot of things, all good. That's why everybody loved him. What did he used to say? Well, it's in his tune, Old Man Time. I was born in Mississippi. The year was 1910. We moved up to Chicago, and we never went back again. And then it goes on from there. And his delivery of all of his stories, amazing. I mean, it just can only come from him. So I will try to do it justice. But that first couple, my first time at Skidmore was just that. I met Milton. And, I should say this. I had believe it or not, in this coffee shop in Topeka, Kansas, there was a big photograph on the wall of many photographs in a typical random coffee shop of Milt Hinton. And I know. And I remember going in there back then, my wife and I, 1994, and I knew I was going to go study with him. So before I left, I had to get that. I had to find out if it was for sale, and if it wasn't, I needed to buy it. I just needed to offer him money and take it. And the guy sold it to me. So that year, I was turning 30, and I was going to not be at home with my wife and then our small child, Kylie, but I was going to be at Skidmore. So I remember sitting backstage because, they have faculty concerts every night. That's part of the cost of admission is to watch these people play and learn from them. I sat backstage with Milton on my birthday and said, Milton, would you sign my picture? I'm turning 30 today. This is June 30th, 1994. And I said, you don't know what this means to me. This is a big deal. He goes, oh, man, that ain't nothing. I said, yeah, it's something. It might not be nothing to you, but it's something to me and the rest of us. Okay, so anyway, that whole thing happened. It was the next year that turned into significant, a significant experience in my life. I drove from Topeka to Skidmore College in Saratoga Springs in my little Geo Tracker. I had a little Geo Tracker. And I finally, after 3 days of driving, I get there and I walk in and I'm going to go register like everybody registers. And then Gerald is there, and they know I'm coming because I had communicated with them like everybody does, and they know I'm coming. And Gerald came up and said, "Kurt, good to see you. How you doing?" And we did that small talk thing, and I said, "Great." And he goes, "Hey, by the way, could you do us a favor? And you should know that at these things, I'm usually the oldest guy there. I'm a late starter. I'm a late bloomer." And so I was one of the older students, so that might have also been why this was about to happen. But he said, Mona, that's Milton's wife, she was ill this year and she couldn't come to the camp. Milton still wanted to come and do it. He's in his 80s by now. And Gerald said to me, "So would you mind living with him? Would you mind living with Milton? In fact, you can stay in the faculty housing. You don't have to stay in the dorms. But, Mona would just feel more comfortable if somebody was with him, making sure he got to and from his classes and to and from his lectures and get his bass back and forth and other stuff just around the house, because they're together all the time." By the way, for those who don't know, it's on his website, milthinton.com. Everybody knows to go to that, I'm sure. But if they don't, Milton was born in 1910 and he left us in 2000. And Mona was born in 1919 and she left us in 2008. But they were together all the time. And a little known fact about Milt Hinton that I didn't know this until this time. He didn't drive. Yeah, he did not drive. I'm not sure. He probably told me, but I couldn't even write it down because I couldn't remember. But I don't know when that started. And I don't know if something actually happened or if he just didn't drive at all ever. I know I probably asked him, "How come you're not," or something like that. But either way, point being, he didn't drive. So they just needed him, They needed him to get back and forth. And this started my friendship with Milton on a much higher level than student, because now it's day in and day out. So that's how I met him. I went to Skidmore the first year in 94. I was just a student. In 95, I show up. Mona had taken ill, and they asked me if I would live with him. And I did for 2 weeks. And it was the experiences that came with that were priceless. The lessons, just the life lessons. But from a humanistic standpoint, he's an older guy. We all have grandparents and great grandparents, if they're still around. And when you take off the jazz icon hat and you put on the "what do you want for dinner" hat, or "what do you want to get for lunch, Milton?" And so we're driving around. That's why it's true. I'm making a joke about it, but the Geo Tracker, here I am driving Milt Hinton around in my tracker. And you know what? We're going to Boston Market to get some lunch. And I think one of the, I want to say poignant or significant, but just human moments was when you're in Saratoga Springs, and this has happened to you at this jazz camp, and you're going to the grocery store with Milt. We're going to the grocery store, so I'm pushing the cart, and here's Milton with his cane, and we're getting food because the guy's got to eat, And he's got a diet. It's not the same as my diet. And so we're walking down the aisle. So that kind of thing was pretty neat, and it's a good memory. Anyway, so that's how I met him, and the introduction on that first day, that second year, was kind of looked like that. It looked just like if you and I were going to go grab some food, stock up our dorm, get ready for the camp, except I was stocking up my dorm with Milt, with the judge. And he calls everybody judge because he can't remember names. He would say, that's what he says all the time. So anyway, that's that. That's that particular meeting. That's the answer to your question.
Okay. Man, having a chance to like spend time with somebody like Milt, I mean, and not only spend time with him, but live with him and take him around, take him to Boston Market, take him to the grocery store. That's what a privilege. And I'm sure you have other fond memories, like whether from the base or otherwise, of that time.
I do. I met a lot of people because of Milton at those in both those years. I was recalling them yesterday, and I have reference points. Okay, what car were we driving? Okay, that had to be 95 because I was the tracker. The van was 96, and Mona was with us, so that was that time. That jazz festival happens. Oh, by the way, and Todd Coleman is the director of that now, and Todd was enormously significant in my life at that time as well. Because we got some of those moments together because of the faculty housing thing. And Todd was there. That first year I was there, not to jump back and forth, I'll just say this real quick. The first year I was there, it was Milton and Steve Laspina was helping with the playing. Because again, Milton was in his mid-80s, so the gymnastics thing wasn't really happening. He would tell you that. But, they had another bass player there for, to cover all the combos and that kind of thing. But Steve Laspina, for me, was in 94. 95, it was, I know it was Todd. I know it was Todd in 95 and 96. And then, of course, Ed Shaughnessy was there, and may he rest in peace. He's gone now. Pat LaBarbera, saxophone player. Joe, his brother, the LaBarbera brothers. He was on the faculty then. And Buddy Baker, trombone player. So, yeah, I have these references, and like Elvin Jones. Elvin. You just say that guy's name. I don't care how much time passes. He's a figure, and he's huge. So we go, this is the weekend of the festival, and we already had our combo concert day, and now it's festival time. And Milton and I are doing whatever we're doing. We go back to the house, and the faculty house, and we're getting ready to go over. And so we go over to the festival. And I met Elvin, Chick Corea, John Faddis, Barry Harris, and Christian McBride all in one day, backstage at that festival. But the way that it happened was we were driving up. We'd either gone back. It's not really important. We'd either gone back because he wanted to get some lunch. So we went back to the house, and then we went back. But as soon as I pulled up, the stage manager was seeking not me, but Milton, but I'm with him, so it's like we're one and the same. Milt, Elvin wants to see you. Elvin wants to see you, and he wants to see you right now. So you have to go see him. I'm thinking to myself, Elvin Jones? Wow. And remember, I'm 30, actually 95, I was 31 that summer. So I'm like, okay. And, Milton, he's got his cane. He's like, oh, okay. Adam Booker, that's what was the catalyst for you and I.
Yeah.
He does a really good impression
right.
of Milton's high voice. I forgot Milton's voice was that high, but it was very high. He's like, oh, okay, let's go see Elvin.
I'd like to take a moment to thank the folks that help keep the lights on here at Contrabass Conversations. Thank you to the A440 Violin Shop, located in beautiful Chicago, Illinois, my adopted hometown for so many years. I lived there over 20 years. And during those 20 plus years, I would take my bass to A440, which is located in Roscoe Village, just west of Wrigley Field. You can drive there. Parking's pretty easy. You can take the train there if you're brave, which I did for years and years when I didn't have a car. And they do great work. They do great repairs. They do great restorations. They have a wonderful array of basses for sale, from student-level instruments all the way up to pedigree instruments. You will find what you're looking for, and bows and everything you need. A440. Check them out at a440violinshop.com. And the Bass Violin Shop in North Carolina. They have been doing great work for years and years and years. And here is a quote from Rick Jones, who is the owner of Acoustic Image. And by the way, Rick has been on the podcast, contrabassconversations.com/Rick Jones. Rick says about the Bass Violin Shop, the bass sounds so great that I went back to an earlier string set that I liked. All of G, Parazzi D, Spiracor Vike A, and Spiracor Orchestral E. I stopped using the Olive and Parazzi because they wouldn't speak before you did your magic. Now they sound great. I played a gig last night and it was a real pleasure. The gut synthetic strings have a stronger fundamental that makes the note pop, resulting in a more defined quarter note feel. And that is coming from the man that designed Acoustic Image amps. So he would be one to speak authoritatively about sound and what a place like the Bass Violin Shop can do for your instrument. Check them out at bassviolinshop.com. And thank you to Upton Bass for sponsoring the podcast. And I have this quote from Lucia Torino of The Devil Makes Three, the wonderful folk punk band. Had her on the podcast a while back, contrabassconversations.com/Lucia Torino. Here's what she has to say about Upton Bass.
I have the Upton travel bass. A friend of mine who was in a band called Brown Bird, she mentioned them. I think she'd had some work done on her bass, and she had a pickup that she got from Upton, and she knew one of the guys who worked down in the factory in Mystic. Also, calling it a factory is really charming because it's really just a barn that smells amazing. That's lots of cool basses and very sweet men. But it's not a factory at all. Right. So I was just sort of looking at all the different options, and then we played the Cayamo Cruise. It's like a jam cruise, but for folk music.
Okay.
Like the nerdy folk music jam cruise. And the year we played, the Wood Brothers were there, and Buddy Miller, and like Lyle Lovett, and all these great musicians. Chris Wood was on the boat, and I think he had 2 Chadwick basses with him, and so I got my courage up and sort of sidled over to him at one point and was like, I need a bass, what should I get? And I talked about Chadwick and about Upton, and he was like, honestly, I'd go with the Upton. And he's like, I'm thinking about switching and having my at-home bass, have Upton put their travel neck on it and convert it. So I was like, well, if it's good enough for Chris Wood, it's good enough for me.
Check them out at uptonbass.com, and thanks for sponsoring the podcast, guys. All right, back to our conversation about the great Milt the Judge Hinton, with Kurt Morrow.
So we're walking backstage, and it's just like any kind of backstage, but, we're walking. And then before we get to where Elvin is, there's Barry Harris. Well, it's not like he's a slouch on piano. He's iconic as well. And so everybody would stop to say hi to Milton. Everybody. There isn't one person that would let that man walk by without, hey, Judge, what's up? Hey, Milton, Joshua Redmond was there, and guys, but back then those guys were younger, Christian and that thing, and the whole Christian McBride thing, I'll tell you in a second. But so we stop and we shake hands with Barry Harris. Oh, this is my friend Kurt, no real background, but I said, oh, Mr. Harris, how are you? Respect. That's the other thing, young players that are listening to these podcasts. You got to have that respect, man. I don't care. You show respect to the ones that came before you. You just do it. You just say nothing and just keep walking. When you're with them, just listen. Don't speak. Don't say anything. Let them do the talking when they want to do it. So we say hi to Barry, and then we go to this dressing room door, and we knock on the door. And pretty soon, a couple seconds later, the door answers. The door opens, and there's Elvin Jones. He was 7 feet tall. And he's like, Milton, how are you? And he probably gave Milton a hug, that whole brotherly thing, because they came up in the same era. If you know your jazz history and that kind of thing. And then Elvin shook my hand because, again, Milton said, this is my friend Kurt, and then, of course, Elvin's hand is like 5 of my hands. And he shakes my hand, and I'm like, "Oh, Mr. Jones, how are you?" Because he was there with, I want to say Time Machine. I think that year he was touring with Time Machine. And I'm not sure if I'm going to say his wife's name right. Keiko, I think was his wife's name, or Kiko or Keiko. She set his stuff up all the time, everywhere. He's on tour. She's the drum tech. I didn't know that until that particular year. And then Delfeo Marsalis was on his band then. And so I don't know when they got in, but Delfeo was sleeping. And Elvin's like, Delfeo, get up. Milton's here. Get up and say hi to Milt Hinton. Get up and say hello to Milt Hinton. And so here comes Delfeo Marsalis. He's just a young kid then, you know. Of course, I know Branford and Wenton, but I know of Delfeo, but I didn't know him. And he's just wiping his eyes, you know. He's good. You know, they're just people, but they're extraordinary on their instrument. That's why we respect them, and they make these marks, you know, Elvin, Milton, Berry. So that's how I met Elvin Jones, through Milt Hinton. That would have never happened in my lifetime. And we're talking, and you and I are talking today about Milt Hinton and bass players and jazz. If you're in that, you understand the significance of it. If you're not, it might mean something, it might not. You know, just like if you're a classical bass player, you know who Francois Raboth is. If you're not, you might go, oh, that's, you know. But if you have his book on thumb position, you know how that will change your life. Yeah. If you even look at page 7. You know?
Right, exactly.
So this was that. I was in that significance, those significant moments. They were just hitting me. I mean, I'm using analogies, but they were just hitting me right and left. And I'm meeting Barry Harris, and now I just met Elvin Jones, and you know it's 1995, and I'm like, wow. So we talked with Elvin, and Milton did for a little while. Again, that respect thing, I just stood back and witnessed it. You know, it's not the time to be fanboy. So if you're listening and you get these experiences, don't be fanboy. It's good to have that up here in your mind, like, oh, that's my hero. But just be cool. Just take it in, because it won't really hit you till later when it's over, you know, because I don't know that the brain can process things like that quickly. Like, what would I have wanted to ask Elvin Jones a year ago when I was studying his playing or his groups? You know, I wasn't thinking about that. I remember when I met Ron Carter at the Sweet Basil when I was on tour with the Glenn Miller Orchestra in 1993. And we went in there, not to get off of Milton, but just for a second, I watched him play with Cedar Walton and drummer Cedar, Ron Carter, Billy Higgins. And after that performance at the Basil, I went up to Ron, because I'm that way, and this is spring of 93, and I went up to him. He was very approachable, but a little standoffish. And I said, I hope I don't lose it here in front of greatness. And he goes, please don't. So fanboy is not what you want. You want, you know, just respect, shake their hand, be gratitude, be grateful to be in front of them. And when you're at these jazz camps, you know, in a classroom setting, that's the time, you know, to ask the question. So anyway, I met Elvin and met Barry, and then there was one significant moment. Christian McBride's first CD had just come out. What is it? Getting to It, I think it's called. And I had listened to it, and I had actually tried to play, you know, work out some of it in the early 90s. And I had gone to the restroom, and I had come out, and Milton, of course, in that environment, I could leave him and everybody be there to take care of him. So he didn't need me there for that. But I had come out, and Milton was standing next to Christian, and he was talking to Christian. And you see, it's a little embarrassing to say this, but I have to be accountable and call a spade a spade. I just didn't really know what he looked like. I knew what he looked like from his CD cover, But I mean, I hadn't been living with it, and I hadn't been, and plus I'm just a polite guy, especially in those situations, and certainly back then. And so I walked up, and now I'm kind of like almost in between the two, but I'm just standing next to Milt, and Milt talking to Christian McBride. And in a moment, I just said, "Hi, my name's Kurt. What's your name?" And Milt like smacked me in the arm. He goes, "Man, that's Christian McBride." "What do you mean, what's my name?" "What's your name?" "That's Christian McBride." And I was like, "Oh, yeah." I didn't know what to say. I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I have your disc." But when you have that many of that level of player walking around you all the time, you just got to keep your eyes on, "Oh, there's that person. Oh, there's that person." That fanboy inside here is going, but you're just, you just got to play it cool and do that. So I met a lot of people that weekend. And that was in 95 because I know we had the tracker, again, my reference, So basically that happened. And we did the second week of the camp. And then, I don't know, man, I didn't see this coming. "Hey, Kurt, you want to come to my house in Queens and stay a few days?" I mean, the listeners can't see me right now. You can see me. But I mean, I'm just going, yeah, sure, I'll do it. I'll come stay at your house. I'll do it. What am I saying? I said, "Yeah, I'd love to, Mill." And I was thinking about it yesterday because I couldn't remember if I just went one time. I was thinking one time, but it had to be two times because I'll get to Mona. Mona's a significant part of this story. So the camp's over, and I'm pretty sure I called my wife. We had our daughter, my wife's name is Julie, and our daughter, we've been together 28 years this year, and our daughter is Kylie, and Kylie's 25. And she lives in Hawaii, and she's studying fashion design. But she knows all these stories. But she was just little back then. She was born in 92. So what was she, 3? And the thing I'll say the word regret. The thing I regret the most, because I didn't know we were going to do this, I have notes that I wrote while I was there. I did. I missed my wife, and my daughter. She was only 3. And so there were times in that faculty dorm when, Milt was in the front room and I was back practicing or whatever. But there was a moment where I thought to myself, I probably should write some of this down. And I like to joke with people I know and say, in the 80s, I didn't have very many moments of clarity in the 80s. But I had the moment of clarity to go to barber college, and I'm sure glad I did, because I'm not gifted like John Patitucci or Milt Hinton or Elvin. I'm not gifted. I have to work at it. And they did too. I'm not saying they didn't. But I had a moment of clarity in the 90s when I was with Milton. And I did write a lot of this stuff down, but I didn't know you and I were going to do this. And that piece of paper did not come with me up here to Montana. So maybe another time we can talk. I can read it and you can edit it into the thing. Because it's got some pretty significant in-the-moment memories or in-the-moment thoughts and feelings about what was happening. And speaking of that, you got to hear this. I go home and stay at Milton's. And one of the things Milton said is, "Hey, I can take you over to Colstein's, and you could, meet Barry Colstein." And I'm sure everybody that listens, if we're all bass players, it's a bass podcast. So I probably don't have to say who Barry Colstein is. But, Colstein's been around since the 40s, and his father, Samuel, started the business. And so at that time, I really wanted to go to Colstein's and meet Barry before that even happened. Because we love the bass. Who doesn't? You were at ISB. Who doesn't want to be around 1,000 basses that are for sale? This is what happened. For everybody listening to this, you'll get it. So Milt Hinton and I, now we just spent 2 weeks together. Now we're in New York, and I've just spent the night at his house in Queens. Had breakfast with him and Mona. Met Mona. Had breakfast. And so now we're going to go to Colstein. So we go. Just a random day to me, as far as I can tell. And but it was not a random day at all. I didn't know what day it was. So we get out of my car, we park the little tracker, and we get out of the car, and we go into Colstein's, and I meet Barry. Prince of a man, to this very day. And I'm friends with him, and he's got many of those. He's got, I think ISB has it now, but back then, he's had LaFaro's bass, Scotty's bass for a long time. And I made mention of that, and Barry goes, "Oh, you want to play it?" I went, "Sure." Remember, 23 years ago, it was a big deal. It's a big deal now, but here I am in Colstein's. I'm with Barry and I'm with Milt Hinton, and I'm playing on Scott LaFaro's bass. I don't know, man. That in itself is significant, but there's more. So I'm playing on this bass, and I noticed personally, my memories of that instrument is that it's pretty small. LaFaro was what kind of bass is it? A Prescott bass. So I'm playing on this iconic instrument. And then there's a guy I notice kind of meandering around the store and, I don't know, looking at some music or whatever. And there was a moment in time where I didn't have the bass in my hand, but I was talking to this guy. Well, it turns out that guy was in the Air Force, and he was a librarian for the Air Force. Now, many years later, I was in the Air Force band from 98 to 02. But at that time, that hadn't happened in my life yet, so I didn't know that was going to happen. Well, that day was the anniversary of Scott LaFaro's death. And he was there because he was going to be interviewing I think it was Scotty's sister, who still lives up there, or at least did at that time. Or let's just say, since I'm not specific enough, a family member for something he was writing. So, for me, again, to anybody else that doesn't play the bass, it doesn't mean anything. But I'm with Milt Hinton meeting Barry Colstein playing Scott LaFaro's bass on the anniversary of Scotty's death. What? It's just a memory for me, but it was a significant memory. And it wasn't no magic dust fell on me and now I can play like LaFaro. It wasn't anything like that. But it was pretty cool. And it was so cool that when that was over and we left Colstein's, not kidding you, that's why this is a significant story, Milt Hinton, in all of 85, 86 years old, we get in my tracker, and he looks at me, and I look at him, and he said this, "You know what just happened in there?" I said, "Yeah, I think I do. I know." Yeah, I was just scratching my head, I'm just a young guy, and now I'm hanging out here in New York. But again, keep going back to this point, because the purpose of this podcast isn't so much about all these stories as it is what can people learn from it. Go. Get out of your little town that you live in and go to other places to learn how to play from these guys, because then they will introduce you to these guys, and then you'll meet this person. And this is important to say at this point in our talk. Todd Coleman has 2 books out. You might have more, but I know The Bass Tradition and The Bottom Line. And in 95, Todd was doing one of his jazz speaks or a lecture, and he held up his book and he said, "I really want you guys to have this book. There's a lot of good information on this book, but more than that, I want you to do your own book. Find bass players that you like," and he went on and did his thing. What I'm saying in this podcast in 2017 is, this is my story. Go make your story. You're the author of your life. You are the author of it. What happens in it is up to you. It can be anything. I didn't have any money. I still don't have any money. But I'm saying I didn't have any money, but I found the money to go do these things, through financial aid and the Department of Education. And I don't know what else is out there these days. But you just have to, I can't stress it enough, go make your own story. Find your jazz camp, find who you want to study with, and then one day you'll be me, and you'll be talking to Jason, and you'll be thinking what it was like to meet whoever, your hero.
But no matter what his name, his game is still the same, to make me forget what I went to the store for or what it was I used to chase those girls for. That's old man time.
Kurt, thank you so much. Such a pleasure to chat with you. As he said in the episode, MiltHinton.com is a wonderful site all about Milt, all about what he did on the bass, discography, biography, the wonderful photographs he took. He is one of those titans of the bass world. And though he passed away before I even started this show, I kind of feel like we did some good here with this episode, Kurt and I did, getting this kind of a document out. Even if you can't speak with the person themselves, once removed, like I did with Orrin O'Brien about Fred Zimmerman, and like I hope to do with so many other people in the future, that's something. I hope, at least. And did you like this episode? I would love to know, because I really think that there's some value in doing this kind of biography about a famous bass player that's left us sort of thing. If you liked it, let me know. You can give me a shout out on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, social media. That's great. We post all these episodes, this one included, there. Or you can email me, feedback@contrabassconversations.com. That'll put you in touch with me. I would love to hear how you like this episode, or really anything about you, what you're up to, where you live, what you'd like to hear more of on the podcast. That would be fantastic. And thank you for being on this journey with me. I have such a great time digging into these conversations. I feel like it's just an exciting new chapter that I've entered in my life these last couple of years, rebooting the podcast and going full force. These 400 plus episodes that we've done, and I love the medium. I think it's such a cool, experimental, flexible medium. And one of the things we can do with this flexible medium is deliver episodes like what we did today about a specific player. So thank you for listening. Thank you for following along. And we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.